Mr. Wilson, the renowned leader of the Labour Party, who discovered that the great thing in the Labour movement was to produce more washing machines than Harold Macmillan. You came along here, Sir Harold, in the unfortunate absence of Roy Jenkins. Tell me, what was your favourite year? In all the years, and there have been many, from the Board of Trade in 1947 into the 1960s, into your abdication, as it was in 1975. What was your favourite year in all those 20, 30 years?
Well, of course, I mean, I think my favourite year was 1964. I mean, that was the year that I became the government.
Yes, you became, but it was a small majority. If I remember rightly, it was 3 or 4. And then in 66, of course, there was the famous landslide. Surely 1966 was something to remember.
Well, yes, but I mean, I think you have to look at the record of that Labour government. I mean, we had 2 of the hottest summers. We won the Eurovision Song Contest twice, the World Cup. I mean, this record is absolutely unparalleled. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Absolutely unmatched for any government since, or before, for that matter.
Oh, that's quite true. It was a famous year. In those years, of course, there was the Rhodesian crisis. And we all remember the famous meeting between you and Ian Smith over a bridge in a train. Do you recall that, Sir Harold?
Well, of course, yes. I mean, of course, Ian, he's a very odd sort of chap, really. Ruthless, deceitful, cunning. I admired him enormously.
Yes, well, thank you, Sir Harold. I'm sure we'll come back to you later on as the evening develops, because there are many other people in the Labour Party that we've grown to respect or to fear or to run away from, depends what your feeling is. Jim, my dear fellow, what's your view on Neil Kinnock in the first place? Let's start with the new budding leader of the Labour Party.
Well, let me just say quite bluntly, Gwynoro, I've got nothing against Neil. He has many fine qualities. It's just I don't know what the hell they are.
Yes. Well, in recent weeks, of course, there's been a controversy in the Welsh press and on radio and television in Wales about the memoirs of Viscount Tommy Pandy, who, if I remember rightly, and let's speak bluntly, as you say, here tonight, there was no love lost. In the years when I was in Parliament with both you and George, there was no love lost between the two of you. Tell me, is it true that you and George have been friends all your parliamentary lives?
Well, let me say this quite bluntly. There's absolutely no truth in the rumour that George and I are enemies. Indeed, only this morning I bumped into George in Cathays Park, and he came up to me and we shook each other warmly by the throat.
Yes. Well, the notable event of the 1983 general election in Wales was your intervention on Labour Party defence policy.
Ah!
Yes, you.
I'm very sorry, Gwynoro. I didn't quite hear what policy you're talking about. I didn't know we had one.
I was on about the great issue when you spoke in that famous meeting in Penarth, which raised the hackles of Skinner and Livingston and Kinnock before he became leader.
Well, you don't have to try hard to do that, do you?
Yeah. Tell me, why did you make that speech?
Well, let me say quite bluntly, the reason I made that speech was for the good of the party. But you know, I've always had a lot of get up and go. And I decided to get up and leave Michael holding the baby.
Well, yes, and of course, well, there we are. We'll come back to you later, Jim. There are many other things we need to ask you. Now, you refer to Michael, and he's suddenly joined us, a man of considerable distinction inside the Labour movement. What do you, and why did you support Mr. Kinnock, Michael, for the leadership of the Labour Party?
Well, of course, we in the Labour Party do these things. I must say that it's a great pleasure to be here tonight at this special gathering. Most gatherings are infectious, you know. But, of course, I must say it's a very great pleasure. And, of course, I've just come straight from the cenotaph, as you know very well, which is why I'm looking as well dressed as I am. And, of course, I've forgotten what the question is. So I'd be grateful if you would ask it. Great.
Well, it's very, very decent of you, to be honest, Mr. Foote. The Senator incident and the great that donkey jacket you have. Where did you buy that?
Well, of course, I mean, you don't expect me to divulge these great matters of state in the present circumstances. But of course, the question which you asked was, why did I support the leader of the Labour Party, or what's left of it anyway? Well, we believed that the way that the Labour Party was going, that within a very short time that it wouldn't even be a minor party in this country. So we decided to make sure that it was.
Well, it's a very honest assertion, Mr. Michael Foote, and you played your part in making sure that happened, I'm sure. Can we now turn to... we met him earlier on in our very delightful dinner. And that was Roy Hughes, the Member of Parliament for Newport, who has played a notable part. I know that, for 5 years I was in Parliament with Roy Hughes, and I didn't understand a word he said in those years. But that still, of course, doesn't deny the fact that he was a Member of Parliament, or as he would say, and Viscount Tonopandi would say, Parliament. The fact of life is they were duly elected. My recollection of you, Roy, was you were an assiduous constituency member who would take people around the House of Commons, sixth formers, and all sorts of people. Can you give us an inclination and an insight into one of your usual days of taking people to the House of Commons?
Well, of course, that is a very serious matter, Gwynoro. I mean, of course, you wouldn't expect me to explain all the details, especially to somebody I ate. But, well, I mean, you know what he's like, we knew what he was like a long time before you had him, Well, but, of course, we usually sort of meet at the Norman porch, and we go up the stairs into the Royal Gallery, and of course on the right you have the robing room. Now that's where Her Majesty the Queen puts her clothes on for these state occasions, Yes, suppose you're all monarchists, are you? And of course, I mean, it's a very historic sort of place. I mean, you've got these ornamental, gubbins on the ceiling, and well, then we go across into the House of Lords, and usually a big queue, to get in there, and Of course, when you get in there, really, we usually walk straight out because there's not very much worth bothering with. Not very much goes on in there, especially since Viscount Tony Pandy got in there, like, you know. But then we go through into the House of Commons. Nobody's allowed to sit down in there, like, you know, because, in 1973, when Ted Heath was Prime Minister, apparently some little girl went on his seat, you know, and of course it caused a major upset, so I understand. But yes, I think that the House of Commons is a marvellous environment. Of course, I mean, it's just as well that there Francis David didn't get in here, you know, otherwise I wouldn't be able to give you my the benefit of my experience, you know.
Thank you, Roy. But I well remember that it was on the terrace of the House of Commons where you often made your mark. I well remember the days when you used to be regaled by young students asking you how old the House of Commons was and how beautiful the structure was, and you were very eloquent in explaining the setup of the House of Commons. Tell us about the occasion when some youngsters asked you about the House of Commons building.
Well, it is, of course, many years old. Of course, I think it's then important to catch them out by asking how old the House of Commons is, like, you know. That's all, like. I don't know why you're holding that thing in front of my mouth, though, like, you know.
Yeah, well, thank you, Roy. Can we now possibly turn to another Roy, Roy Jenkins, who failed to turn up at the dinner? I'm sure he has some views about what was said at the Social Democratic Conference in Tenby this weekend and the future of the Alliance in Wales and in Britain. How do you feel after having whatever was done to you recently in the hospital, Roy?
I believe that it's a very great privilege to be here tonight. I must say, it's many, many years since I visited Dean Bicky Piscott. I must say, of course, mass hysteria in the audience. We in the SDP Liberal Alliance, we don't believe in mass hysteria. We believe in a partnership of principle, rather than narrow doctrinal dogmas of the Labour Party and the Liberal Party.
Yes, but have you any view about how the party is led at the moment?
I believe that I'm a great admirer of Dr. David Owen. But let me just say that I believe a glass of claret a day keeps the doctor away. I'm a great believer in that, especially with this doctor.
Well, Roy, we'll come back to you later. You need, having been recently in the hospital, you need a rest, of course. I think we should come to a more local situation, and there is a Welshman that we in the SDP have grown to love and hate because we worked for him, and then we were disenchanted with what he did. Felix. What was your recollection of the Cynnon Valley by-election?
I remember Frank Nevers and Mary Morgan, two members of my staff. And that's it.
Yes, but
Of course, I haven't been a member of a socialist party before, and I was very disappointed to find out that you are not good Tories.
You made a sudden conversion. I think you made the conversion before the count. I mean, many of us have made conversions that have been called quick, but that was quite astounding. You have very firm views on law and order. Now, from what background? Why have you developed those views?
I am a product of a good social democratic upbringing. I was whipped twice a day before breakfast, and it hasn't done me any harm.
Yes. Well, you're now in Lampeter, of course, studying in that university college. Geraint Howells is the Member of Parliament for Cardigan. How do you fancy becoming the Tory candidate against Geraint Howells?
I am looking forward to it very much indeed, especially since he isn't as eloquent as I am.
Thank you, Felix. It's a great pleasure to interview you, and I don't think we can delve for too long on your great knowledge of Welsh politics, which is considerable. Tony Benn has arrived here. It's a pleasure to see a man who has done a great deal of good to the Labour Party, and yet who has got a view of politics which many understand. Well, Tony, I remember going to your house often in Holland Park, and in Holland Park it was pint mugs of tea, as I remember it. How do you view the political situation now, Tony?
Well, of course, Gwynoro. I mean, for a start, I'm not going to answer your question because I think it's a trick question, and I'm far too experienced, and you're far too experienced, and we all know what you're trying to do. And apart from which, you're one of those traitors who defected to the SDP along with Ramsay MacDonald and George Brown, and. Of course, we all know that you're next in line for the House of Lords, along with Frank Chappell. And are there any other questions you'd like to ask me?
Well, what's your view? What's your view on the current state of politics, nationalisation and radicalism in politics? What's your view on the SDP in Wales?
Well, of course, what I believe is that we in the Labour Party believe that you have to nationalise banking, shipping and insurance, and try saying that when you've had a few. And you have to get rid of the House of Lords and abolish private education. And as you can see, I mean, the Labour Party's a moderate party. We're not asking very much, really. And, I mean, you don't expect me to say anything about the semi-detached party, do you?
No, I don't want to expect that. But you have got no advice to the officers of the SDP in Wales?
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, I must, for a start, I've got to pay tribute to Gwynoro because he's tried very hard, and to his credit, of course, he's done for the SDP what I've done for the Labour Party, and of course, I mean, let's face it, there aren't many people who could do that.
Thank you, Tony. I think let's turn to a more moderate. I've heard that story many times before. I knew it was coming, that's why I asked the question. Peter Shaw. Now, there's a man who probably missed the boat in the party, in the Labour Party, who had a considerable future, who was a shadow chancellor, a respected Secretary of State of Trade and Industry, a man who had a brilliant attitude in terms of Labour politics, but now in the last few years is in the twilight of politics because he's not regarded anymore as a fashionable politician. Peter, how do you see things now?
Ha! Well, I do believe, and we in the Labour Party do believe, and we have frequently believed, and indeed it is very hard not to believe that we in the Labour Party believe that what we must do is to do away with that disgraceful anachronism of the European community. Ha!
Does it mean that people like Roy Jenkins should never have been in the Labour Party?
Yes, it does, because of course, he is a tin pot parlour socialist of the Edwardian era, and I do believe that what we have to do is to get rid of this disgraceful anachronism of the Tory party and the SDP. Ha!
And Neil Kinnock?
I don't think we'll continue on this line. In fact,
I see. I think we should. Maybe we should now come to an end with Nicholas Edwards. I don't think we should actually have a session on Welsh politics or an evening in Tenby without the Secretary of State for Wales. At the end of the day, however irreverent we are as an SDP party, there is, after all, the Secretary of State for Wales who has done a great deal for Pembrokeshire, so he says. Well, Nicholas, how do you view now Welsh politics?
Yes, well, I say, it is very great. It's a very great pleasure to be interviewed by you, Jones. And I mean, it's a very great pleasure to be back in one's constituency again. I mean, I've just come down from London in that damned helicopter. I've just been beastly sick all the way down.
But here we are. There's a lot of criticism from all the other parties of how successful the government in Wales is. What is your judgment on the record of the Tory government over the last 5 years in Wales?
Well, of course, I mean, these people do say these things with absolute rubbish. I mean, let's face it, all of the economic statistics are on the up. Unemployment's on the up. Inflation's on the up. Rates are on the up. A whole damn lot's on the up. We'll get you, Welshers.
Yes. Well, thank you, Nicholas. I think we'll finish with Roy Hughes before we have a freer evening afterwards. You see, the thing I remember about you, Roy, in my 5 years in Parliament was that you actually despised Neil Kinnock. You spent years, as I recall it, degrading the man. Now, why are you happy to work and be, in fact, a shadow minister for Wales in a Kinnock shadow cabinet?
Well, of course, he is the accepted, unofficial indeed, leader of the party in Parliament, and I believe, of course, that I believe that I should be representing the people of Newport East, actually in the shadow cabinet. But, I remember that, of course, I was offered a place in the cabinet by a previous Prime Minister. And he offered me this year place, and it was very difficult, because as I was trying to get in the cabinet, the door got stuck, and I knocked the whole thing over, and broke all the glasses, I was very embarrassing experience. I think I was a bit too big to get inside, really,
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think you've been very frank, Roy. I think there's one final question, and then The half hour is coming to an end, and it's been a privilege for me to have been offered this opportunity by my colleagues in the media to try and get a bit of glory for myself, to rediscover my past. Can I ask you, Viscount Tunnapandi, George Thomas, as he was to you and I, and on the Welsh table in the House of Commons, we sat together despising each other. As you well remember, what's your view now on George and what he said in his book about Welsh Labour politicians?
Well, of course, like, you know, I mean, this Viscount Tony Pandy, like, you know, and his brother Andy Pandy, like, you know. That ponting, like, when I just do and it will come into really, I mean, let's see, you know, like, it'll be the SDP, won't it? I don't know what it would be. It would be the SDP, like, you know. Well, there we are. Look, there's lots of enjoyment to come. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Whitcutt.